Okay, in this video we're going to continue our discussion of the Homeric epics, and whereas in the last video we focused on the content of those epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey, in this video we're going to see what those poems can tell us about life in early Iron Age 2. Right, that phase from around 1000 to 750 BC, during which a lot of the composition of those poems seems to take place. The world that's described in the Homeric poems seems to reflect that period of time of early Iron Age too, although admittedly there are some aspects of it that do reflect the Mycenaean world as well, so it is a little bit confused there. But we can use these poems as a bit of a basis for trying to reconstruct what life in early Iron Age 2 may have been like. So first up, the basic social unit of life in early Iron Age 2, well, I should say in the Homeric poems, is the household, which in ancient Greek is called the oikos. And so the oikos contains kind of a lot of things. So the oikos includes the family, and this could be both the sort of nuclear family and the extended family, if there's any like brothers, sisters, cousins, nephews, aunts, anything like that, who are living with you, that includes them all. An oikos often has servants. They're known as the thetes. We'll get to them in a moment. These are laborers, paid laborers who work in your house. It includes some slaves. These slaves are not paid. They have no rights. They were acquired usually through raiding. This also includes the house itself and the property within the house, like all the objects and possessions. This includes the livestock, which we'll see is the major source of wealth, the major economic activity. And this includes the land, which is known as the kleros. The kleros is a plot of land that belongs to a particular oikos and is passed down over generations. So society at this time is highly patriarchal. It will continue to be highly patriarchal in the ancient Greek world. So this means that the father, the oldest male member of this family, is the supreme authority. He has an incredible amount of say over the lives of every single other person in this group. After he dies, the kleros, the lot, and his property gets divided amongst any of his legitimate sons. So sons he had by his wife. He may have sons by servants and slaves as well. Those don't count as much. Daughters don't get as much. Women in general in the early Iron Age, in the Homeric poems, are seen as unable to supervise their own lives, so they're not allowed to make decisions for themselves. Decisions about their lives are made by a male authority figure, generally their fathers, and then after their marriage, their husband. And so they are always under male authority. They do receive a dowry, so they don't get an equal share of the oikos after their father's death, but they are given some kind of wealth as their dowry, which is a gift that is given to their new husband when they get married, and it allows them to attract maybe a better husband socially. In general, the value for women in the Homeric poems is in their beauty and their ability to do craft work like weaving, right? The better they can do this, the better their value. So as we said, the servants are these thetes. These are people who do not own their own land. They don't have their own oikos. They are too poor, and so they support themselves by serving in another oikos. And again, we said they're paid for this. They do labor there. They live there, but they do receive some kind of compensation or payment. And the slaves we mentioned are brought in from raiding, right? And they are completely without rights and forced to live and serve in the oikos. A wealthy oikos in the Homeric world is one that has a very large amount of livestock. So this could be things like sheep and goats especially, but even cattle sometimes as well. And so if they have a large amount of livestock, really big herds, that means that they have surpluses of meat and hides and wool and things like that, which they can trade, and it allows them to enrich themselves. And if they don't have enough livestock, they can raid for more. So they can lead a little party of all the warrior age men in the oikos to raid some neighbors in another place and try to steal some of their livestock and bring it back. This kind of raiding behavior, really common. Now, oikoi, I should say, the plural of this is oikoi, so you may hear me say that. Alright, so these oikoi are not all distinct and separate from each other. In general, you have a bunch of oikoi which make up a single village. So they're kind of clustered together, and you will have the houses themselves kind of clustered near each other to make up the village, and then they own land around it. And every day your workers have to walk out to the fields to check on the livestock and to do things like that. So these villages will have a chief, right, who is the leader of the village, and he may be supported by a council of elders, and together those people will settle any disputes that might arise in the village. Now, you can also group villages together into chiefdoms, right? So these are regions, regions of a few villages, right, multiple villages. And these are ruled over by a high chief, the basileus, right? This is the term used in the Homeric poems sometimes. He's a couple, but the basileus is one. So the basileus rules over all these villages. Although the villages themselves seem to be fairly independent, they can more or less do what they want. They just have to respond to the basileus when he asks them for something. And so he is supported by his own council. It's probably made up of the local chiefs, the village chiefs, and any other notable male members of society, anyone who has especially large estate or something like that, who's very wealthy, and so on. All right. So the region that he rules is also, I'll mention, it's known as the demos. This is a term we saw in Mycenaean Greek as referring to sort of the common people, all the people being ruled in one region. And so that sense of that term is continued here in the Homeric poems. Now, the way the basileus reaches this position is by ensuring the loyalty of everyone under him, right? Kind of everyone has to agree that they're going to follow this guy. So how does he do it? Well, persuasion is one, if he can speak very well and persuade people, but fighting prowess is a big one. Probably what happens is the basileus, one of his things that he does, is he leads raids. He gets together the local chiefs and the men from their houses or their villages who follow them, and they will raid neighboring chiefdoms around them. And they're raiding for livestock as well as high-value goods, right? Things made of gold and silver, women, right, who can be used as concubines or slaves, things like that. So he leads those raids, and he, in battle, proves his manliness, and he also brings in a lot of stuff, and then he distributes it to everyone below him, and as long as they keep getting stuff, they're probably pretty happy with him. So raiding is a pretty basic feature. So the Trojan War can be understood as a very large-scale raid of the city of Troy, in some sense. Now, between chiefdoms, there's probably relationships between chiefdoms. Some could be hostile, where they're raiding each other. Some could be much more friendly, where they have agreed to peace, for instance. And we know that there are people like ambassadors, the chiefs themselves, the basileus themselves, or their representatives, who maintain these kinds of relationships sometimes. And this is done based on a principle known as Zania. This is a really important idea here in the Homeric world. Zania. These are the rules of hospitality. It's sometimes also known as guest friendship. Guest friendship. The idea is that you can have a bond of Zania, where two oikoi or two chiefdoms are bound together in friendly relations. And this is symbolized through staying at each other's homes and being hospitably treated, but also the exchange of gifts. So there's lots of scenes in the Homeric poems where someone goes to another place, a palace, and they are received, and they are given all sorts of like fancy cups and belts and stuff. And they don't really have any use for them. They're probably just going to take them back home and put them in their own treasury and then give them to someone who comes to them for hospitality. But the exchanging of gifts amongst these chiefs allows them to maintain relationships with each other, friendly ones, so that they're not all constantly pitted in warfare. So this idea of Zania, and that you can create a relationship, a friendly relationship based on mutual exchange of gifts and hospitality, is very important in the Homeric poems. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about for this video. In our next video, which is our last one on the Homeric world, we will address religion, right? The religion of the Homeric poems, and really the religion of the ancient Greek world in general. All right, thanks for watching. Bye.